Hi, I'm Stephen Majors with the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine. I'm joined today at ARM Studios by Whitney Ijem, who's a managing director at Canaccord Genuity. Whitney, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Great. And so yesterday we heard from Dr. Nicole Verdun from the FDA. And there's obviously a lot of things going on at the Office of Therapeutic Products, and I know you wrote about this as well, but what really stood out to you from her discussion yesterday, and then where do you see things going forward with that office?
So I think her talk was really interesting because there were a few sort of related key takeaways, whether it's the desire to continue to accelerate approval, whether it's kind of the reorganization and the building that she's been doing as she joined to kind of get the office ready to go, and some of her future thinking on where she'd like to take the office. I thought the unifying theme across all of it was really this desire for the FDA to be viewed as a partner. They view themselves as the partner, and they want, I think, externally to be viewed that as well. And I think that's unique and important from an investor perspective because that is not always the case. And so I think the more and more the FDA and Dr. Verdun and her office can walk the walk, in addition to talking the talk, so to speak, I think that will be really helpful and interesting from an investor perspective, as hopefully that translates into some of these therapeutics kind of doing what she said exactly, moving through the regulatory process more efficiently and with less surprises along the way, which is really where things become uncomfortable from an investor perspective. When there's surprises, nobody likes surprises.
Of course. And so
unless they're positive surprises.
Yes, yeah. No one will complain about those. But as an analyst, you have a unique view on what's going on across the sector. You follow the sector really closely. When you look out the next year or so, what are some of the key milestones that you think are really going to drive investor sentiment, not just about specific products or programs, but about the sector writ large?
So I think one of the things, or several of the things that I guess will continue to help rebuild and fuel investor sentiment in the space are what we just talked about, kind of what feels like a growing positive regulatory tailwind, and just the ability for companies to really have open and active dialogue with the regulatory agencies to be able to kind of know what they need to do and hopefully execute against that to be able to move through. I think the more and more we see that happening without surprises along the way, will kind of rebuild confidence and sentiment that these therapies can actually move through regulatory agencies efficiently. I think the other exciting thing it will just be the amount of clinical data that's coming next year. So I think it's both from later stage programs where we'll just be getting bigger data sets that can really kind of solidify profiles that we've already seen emerging, but also some of these newer, particularly on the gene editing side, kind of newer next gen technologies really starting to prove themselves in the clinic. So from a sentiment perspective, I think things have really shifted from we're very interested in exciting and new technologies to, okay, but how do these technologies actually work from a medicine and patient perspective? And I think we're going to start to get a lot of those answers, or more of those answers, in 2025.
Great. And yeah, and also related to investor sentiment is commercialization. And so there's been a lot of attention on some of the early gene therapy rollouts, sickle cell, hemophilia, et cetera. Perhaps they've been a little bit slower than some expected, although I think you could make good arguments for why it wasn't just a rush of patients for those. But what kind of lessons or takeaways do you see from those stories that might get applied later on to future programs?
Yeah, so an interesting question in terms of the lessons from the launches that we've seen so far, kind of applying to the future. I think one of the biggest ones from an investor perspective, which is easier said than done, but the importance of managing investor expectations around these launches. So I was in a panel yesterday where we were talking about CMC, kind of regulatory strategy, market access, managing the patient journey, the actual logistics of getting these therapies to the patients at the right time, and kind of what that requires. It's very complex. A lot of it is very new, and it just takes time. And I think as long as companies are thoughtful in communicating that, and kind of just making sure to level set expectations to something achievable, not feeding into the hype, so to speak. I think that's the most important lesson, and I think one that the field has learned, and honestly one that will probably help investor sentiment as well. I think with some of these launches behind us, or the initial lack of delivery on some of the expectations behind us, I think hopefully expectations have been reset and future launches are positioned well.
Great. Well, I think that's a great place to stop. Whitney, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much.